Somewhere in Rick Sanchez's garage sits a small box holding a copy of his dead wife. Rick built it, locked it, and then erased his own memory that it is even there. That is the kind of secret this show buries. And in the very first episode of Season 9, it quietly started digging them all back up. The opener brings back the single most dangerous villain in the entire series, then reminds everyone of every loose thread still waiting in the dark. A forgotten wife, a trusted friend who might be fake, an old warrior already pulled back from death once before. Here is the idea hiding under all of it. This show says, loudly and often, that nothing matters, while secretly proving the opposite season after season. Everything matters, and nothing painful ever truly stays gone. Tonight, slowly and gently, every twist in the premiere, and every buried piece of the past it points toward. Welcome to Ricktopus. Let's get into it. The secret in the garage. By the time Season 9 begins, Rick Sanchez has finally won the fight that almost broke him. For years, the show pointed toward one enemy above all the rest. A version of Rick called Rick Prime, the one who killed Rick's wife and his young daughter long before the series even started. That hunt sat underneath everything. It shaped who Rick was, why he drank, why he kept the people around him at arm's length and never let them get too close. So when Rick finally beat Prime and ended that long chase, something inside him seemed to come loose. He made a kind of quiet promise after that. Not a speech, not a big emotional moment in front of the family, but a change in the way he carried himself. He would try to be a better grandfather. He would try to actually be there for Beth. He would try, for once, to stop running from his own life. And so, the family settled. The constant danger that used to chase them through every episode seemed to back off. The fighting slowed. The Smith house started to feel less like a place people hid in between disasters and more like an actual home. That calm is the most important thing to understand before anything else in Season 9, because the whole premiere is built on top of it. The show spends its opening minutes showing a family that has, against all odds, found a little bit of peace. The first episode is called There's Something About Morty, and it opens on an ordinary morning. Morty walks through the house drinking a Slurpee from the 7-Eleven, just a normal kid on a normal day. His parents are outside enjoying a brand new pool. Summer is relaxing inside, talking with a friend on the phone. Nothing is on fire, nobody is screaming. There are no monsters at the door, and no portal tearing open in the living room. The morning moves slowly and gently, and that slowness is doing real work. The show is letting the audience breathe. It is showing what this family looks like when the world is finally leaving them alone. Morty drifts toward the garage, the way he always has, because the garage is where Rick lives and works, and where most of their adventures begin. Rick is in there tinkering, building a beer that chills itself, the kind of small and silly invention that fits a man who has nothing more serious to worry about. Everything looks normal, everything looks calm, and then Morty notices something small that does not fit the picture. Rick is texting someone on his phone, and the moment Morty gets close, Rick acts like he does not want Morty to see who it is. That tiny moment is the crack in the glass. A grandfather hiding his phone from his grandson is such an ordinary human thing that it almost slides by without notice. But this is Rick, and Rick has spent the last few seasons slowly learning how to be honest with the people he loves. A secret, after all of that, means something. Morty feels it right away. The good mood in the room shifts. The question hangs there in the air, quiet but heavy. Who is Rick hiding from his own grandson? The answer lands like a punch. Rick has been texting Evil Morty. For anyone who has followed the show, that name carries enormous weight. Evil Morty is the one character the series has treated as a true equal to Rick, a version of Morty who got tired of being used and decided to become the most dangerous person across all the different worlds. He vanished at the end of his last big appearance, and fans spent seasons wondering when or if he would ever come back. Season 9 answers that question in its very first episode, and it answers it in the smallest, most personal way possible. There is no grand entrance, at least not yet. There's just a secret phone, a hidden conversation, and the slow horror on Morty's face as he realizes what his grandfather has been doing behind his back. What makes the opening work so well is how plainly it is built. The episode does not rush to explain itself. It lets the calm stretch out first, lets the family feel safe, and only then slips the knife in. The choice to open on an everyday morning with a pool and a Slurpee and a phone call makes the reveal hit harder than any explosion could. The danger does not arrive from outside this time. It is already inside the house. It has been sitting in the garage all along, hidden inside Rick's pocket. Underneath the surface, the episode is quietly about one of Morty's oldest fears. Morty has always worried, somewhere deep down, that he is not special to Rick, that he is just one Morty out of endless Mortys, easy to swap out, easy to forget. The whole series has poked at this fear again and again. So when Morty learns that Rick has been talking to another version of himself, and worse, that Rick and Evil Morty seem to to actually get along, that old wound opens right up. Morty does not just feel left out, he feels replaceable. He starts to wonder if his grandfather might prefer a smarter, sharper, more interesting version of him. That fear is the real engine of the early part of the episode. Morty is not scared of Evil Morty because Evil Morty is powerful, though he is. Morty is scared because of what Evil Morty represents to him personally. Here is proof, sitting in the garage, that a better Morty exists, and that Rick has been spending time with him in secret. For a kid who already feels small next to his genius grandfather, that is a special kind of nightmare. Rick, meanwhile, carries his own weight in this scene, even if he hides it well. The man who promised to be more open has gone right back to keeping secrets. There is a deep and very old habit in Rick of solving problems alone, of deciding that he knows best and that the people around him are safer if they stay in the dark. The whole point of his recent change was supposed to be that he would stop doing exactly this. So the secret phone is not only a plot hook, it is a small betrayal of the promise Rick made to himself, and the episode is aware of that. It puts Rick's growth on trial in the very first minutes of the season. The thing that keeps this from being a simple step backward is the reason behind the secret, which the episode slowly begins to reveal. Rick is not chatting with Evil Morty for fun, and he is not switching sides. He has been forced into it. Evil Morty has something over him, a threat strong enough to make even Rick bend, and that threat is pointed straight at the family. So Rick did what Rick always does. He decided to handle it quietly, by himself, without telling anyone, because in his mind, that is how he protects the people he loves. He keeps the danger in his own pocket so it never reaches the dinner table. That choice sits at the center of who Rick is. He loves his family, and the way he shows that love is by lying to them. He hides the worst things from them because he believes they are better off not knowing. The trouble is that this exact instinct has blown up in his face over and over. Secrets in this show never stay buried. They always crawl back out, usually at the worst possible moment, and they almost always hurt the people Rick was trying to shield. The premiere knows this history. It is built on the tension between a man who is trying to be better and a man who cannot stop protecting people in the most damaging way he knows. For the family, the calm of that opening morning is about to be revealed as a lie. The pool, the slow breakfast, the easy phone calls, all of it was happening while a serious danger was already in motion, managed in secret by the one person they trust to keep them safe. The peace was real for them, but it was never real for Rick. He was carrying the weight the whole time, smiling through it, building his silly, self-chilling beer while a threat to all of them ran quietly in the background. This is what makes the start of season 9 feel so sharp. The show takes the happy ending the family thought they had earned and shows that it was resting on a hidden problem the entire time. The fight with Rick Prime may be over, but a new shadow has moved in to take its place. And this one is more personal because it comes wearing Morty's own face. The big question the season opens with is a simple one, even if the answer is not. Has Rick actually changed? He says he wants to be better. He acts, most of the time, like a man trying to do right by his family. But the moment a real danger appears, he slips straight back into his oldest habit, hiding the truth and shouldering everything alone. The premiere does not let that contradiction sit quietly. It puts it front and center. It asks whether the new, softer Rick is real, or whether the old Rick has just gotten better at pretending. Morty is the one who sees through it first, and that matters. For most of the series, Morty has trailed behind Rick, confused and one step too slow. Here, he is the one who notices the secret, the one who feels that something is wrong before anyone explains it. His fear of being replaced makes him pay closer attention than usual, and that attention is exactly what cracks the case open. The kid who worries he does not matter turns out to be the one person paying enough attention to spot the danger hiding in plain sight. So the season starts not with a bang, but with a quiet, sinking feeling. A normal morning, a hidden phone, a name nobody wanted to hear again. The peace the Smith family fought so hard to win is shown to be thinner than it looked, held together by a secret that was always going to come undone. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, but the secret is only half the story. The reason Rick agreed to work for the one enemy clever enough to trap him comes down to a single object, a weapon so dangerous that even Rick, who fears almost nothing, decided it was worth lying to his entire family to keep it away from them. Section 2. The weapon that could erase everyone. Rick had just finished the hardest fight of his life. The enemy who took his wife and his young daughter, the version of himself called Rick Prime, was finally gone. That should have been the end of it. The worst person in Rick's world was dead, the long chase was over, and the family was safe at last. So the cruelest part of how season 9 begins is what it does with that victory. It takes the thing Rick worked the hardest to destroy, and it brings a piece of it right back to his doorstep. The reason Rick agreed to work in secret for Evil Morty comes down to a single object, It is called the Omega device, and what it does is the stuff of nightmares. Most weapons can only hurt one person in one place at one time. This one is different in a way that is hard to even picture. It can reach across all the different worlds at once. If it is used on a single version of a person, it does not just kill that one version, it wipes out every version of them, everywhere, in every world that exists, all at the same moment. Someone hit by this weapon does not just die, they stop having ever existed across the whole wide spread of worlds with no copy left behind anywhere. That idea is terrifying on its own. What makes it land so hard in this story is where the weapon comes from. The Omega device is tied directly to Rick Prime, the very enemy Rick just beat. It carries his fingerprints. It works the same monstrous way Prime always worked, by reaching everyone, everywhere at once, instead of settling for a single target. This is important because that exact kind of weapon is how Rick lost everything in the first place. Rick Prime did not simply kill Rick's wife in one world, he killed her in all of them, every version of her, in one stroke, so that there was no world Rick could run to where she was still alive. That single act is the wound the whole series grew out of. So the weapon now pointed at Rick's family is not a random new threat, it is a ghost. It is the same horror that took Diane, dragged back into the light and placed in the hands of someone clever enough to use it. Evil Morty did not invent this nightmare. He found what was left of Prime's work after Prime was gone, and he rebuilt it. The thing Rick thought he had ended by killing Prime turned out to outlive its maker. The danger Rick believed he had buried simply changed owners. Evil Morty understood exactly what he was holding. A normal threat would not be enough to control Rick, because Rick is the smartest person in nearly any room, and he is very hard to scare. But this weapon is the one thing in all the worlds that can frighten him, because it strikes at the only soft spot he has left. It does not threaten Rick, it threatens his family, and it threatens them in a way that nothing and no one could ever undo. To make the threat even more real, Evil Morty did something cold and clever. He reached into a carefully chosen world and grabbed versions of the whole Smith family, a Rick, a Beth, a Jerry, and a Summer, all picked from a place built to make the perfect hostages. Then he locked those versions away inside the weapon itself. The message could not be clearer. Step out of line and the device goes off. Refuse to help and every version of the people Rick loves blinks out of the worlds forever, including the ones standing right there in the house. That is the trap Rick walked into. Evil Morty came to him not as an old rival looking for a fair fight, but as a man holding a button that could end Rick's entire family in a single press. Rick himself described the whole arrangement plainly. It was a hostage situation. He was not a partner and he was not a friend. He was a prisoner, being made to do jobs for the one person who had found the only leash strong enough to hold him. The way the episode handles this is quiet and steady, which makes it worse. There are no long, shouted explanations about how the weapon works. The danger is laid out calmly, almost coldly, and then left to sit there. The show trusts the simple horror of the idea to do the work. A weapon that can erase a person from every world at once does not need fireworks to feel frightening. It just needs to be understood. And once it is understood, it changes the meaning of every calm moment that came before it. This is also why Rick kept the whole thing secret. And the choice makes a sad kind of sense once the weapon is clear. Rick could not fight his way out of this in the open. He could not outshoot or outrun a threat that reaches everywhere at once. Telling the family would only put them in more danger and fill them with a fear they could do nothing about. So, Rick fell back on his oldest move. He carried the weight alone. He smiled at the breakfast table and built his silly, self-chilling beer while a button that could erase them all sat in the pocket of his worst enemy. He decided that the kindest thing he could do was lie. There is a deep sadness in that decision. Rick spent the past seasons learning, slowly and painfully, how to let his family in. He promised himself he would stop hiding. And then, the moment a true danger appeared, he buried it because the danger was too big to share. The very weapon that grew out of his greatest loss forced him straight back into the lonely habit he was trying to break. Evil Morty did not only trap Rick's family, he trapped the better version of Rick that was just starting to take shape. For Morty, this is the part that cuts the deepest once he learns it. His grandfather was not sneaking around for fun, and he was not choosing Evil Morty over his real grandson. He was being forced every step of the way by a threat aimed at all of them. The secret texting, the hidden phone, the strange closeness with another version of Morty. All of it was Rick trying to keep a monster fed and calm so it would not turn on the family. Knowing the reason does not make the betrayal hurt less. In some ways it hurts more, because it means Rick was suffering in silence the whole time, alone with a fear he refused to let anyone help carry. The weapon also quietly reframes the win over Rick Prime. For the longest time, beating Prime felt like the ending the show had been building toward. The bad man dies, the hero gets his piece, the family moves on. Season 9 looks at that clean ending and pokes a hole in it. Killing Prime did not undo what Prime built. The tools of his cruelty were still out there, waiting, and all it took was one smart enemy to pick them up. The lesson sitting underneath the premiere is a hard one. Some damage does not end when the person who caused it dies. It lingers. It gets passed on. It finds new hands. Evil Morty makes the perfect new hands for it too. Out of everyone in all the worlds, he may be the only one who could use this weapon to control Rick rather than simply destroy him. A lesser enemy would have just pressed the button and walked away. Evil Morty saw something more useful. He saw a way to put the smartest man across the worlds to work, to make Rick run his errands and fight his battles, all by holding the one thing Rick could never risk. The threat is not only powerful, it is aimed with the kind of patience that makes it truly dangerous. The calm of that opening morning now reads completely differently. The pool, the slow breakfast, the easy phone calls, all of it was happening on top of a hidden danger that could end every last one of them. The family thought the war was over. Rick knew it was not. He had simply taken the whole burden onto his own shoulders and decided to carry it quietly so the people he loved could enjoy a peace that was never really theirs to enjoy. A weapon like this seems to leave only two terrible choices. Rick can keep serving Evil Morty forever, doing whatever he is told, living the rest of his life as a tool for his worst enemy. Or he can refuse and watch the family he just promised to protect be erased from every world in an instant. Trapped between those two doors, even Rick looks cornered. The smartest man across all the worlds appears, for once, to be truly stuck. And that is exactly the feeling the episode wants in this moment. It builds the trap with care. It makes the weapon clear, makes the threat personal, and makes Rick look as boxed in as he has ever been. A man who fears almost nothing is shown bending to the will of a boy with his grandson's face. And the bending looks real. The danger looks real. The hopelessness looks real. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Rick is still Rick, and a cage built by an enemy is never quite as solid as it looks. While Evil Morty believed he was holding the leash, while he sipped his drinks and gave his orders and felt sure he had won, something else was already in motion. The trap that seemed to have no way out had a crack in it from the very start, one that nobody but Rick had noticed yet, and it was about to swing wide open. Section 3. The trap inside the trap. Rick looked cornered, and that was the whole point. Evil Morty held a weapon that could erase the family from every world. He held hostage versions of them locked inside it, and he held the one thing strong enough to keep Rick in line. From the outside, there was no way out. Rick had two doors, and both of them ended in misery. He could serve Evil Morty forever, or he could watch everyone he loved vanish. So Rick did what he was told. He went to work. The first job was a big one. Evil Morty needed Rick and Morty for a team-up, the kind of forced partnership the show has used before, where two enemies have to stop fighting each other long enough to deal with something worse. This time, the something worse was a creature called the Collective, and the Collective was a true horror. It did not just attack worlds, it ate them. It swallowed whole worlds the way a person might swallow a snack, growing larger and hungrier with each one it took, a threat so big that even Evil Morty could not handle it alone. So the three of them set out together, the grandfather, the grandson, and the dark version of the grandson, to stop a thing that could eat everything. Beating the Collective took cleverness rather than muscle, because no weapon could outmatch something that size. The trick they landed on was simple and strange at the same time. The Collective ate everything in its path, so they turned that hunger against it. They found a way to make the creature swallow itself. A thing built only to consume was made to consume the one thing it should never have touched, and in doing so, it ate its own existence away. The hunger that made it so dangerous became the exact reason it fell. That kind of solution, where the answer is hidden inside the problem, is the show at its sharpest, and it sets the tone for the whole episode. The smartest move is almost never the strongest one. While all of this was happening, the episode did something sneaky with the way the characters acted around each other. Rick had spent the last few seasons softening, becoming calmer and more careful, learning to think before he wrecked everything. Evil Morty, on the other hand, was loose and reckless and ready to burn anything down to get what he wanted. So, for a stretch of the episode, the roles quietly swapped. Rick became the steady one, the level head trying to keep things from spinning out, while Evil Morty played the wild card, the unpredictable one nobody could quite control. For a show built on Rick being the chaos at the center of every room, watching him become the responsible adult in the partnership was a genuine surprise. The change felt real while it lasted, and it made the team-up play almost like a buddy story. Two clashing personalities forced to share a car. That swap is the kind of thing the show loves to set up and then knock down. And knock it down, it did. The calm, sensible Rick was a mask. The whole partnership was a mask. Underneath the obedient errand runner was the same Rick who has been 3 steps ahead of everyone for the entire series, and he had been running a plan from the very first moment. The turn comes around the middle of the episode, and it lands beautifully because of how patiently it was hidden. There is a scene at a diner out among the stars where the 3 of them sit together after the big fight, almost like a family grabbing a meal. Evil Morty relaxes. He sips his milkshakes, comfortable, sure of himself, certain that he still holds all the power because he still holds the weapon. He has no reason to worry. As far as he knows, the Omega device is safe back in his own world, and as long as it exists, Rick belongs to him. But the weapon was not safe. While Evil Morty was busy feeling like the winner, Rick had already slipped back to Evil Morty's home world and destroyed the device. The one thing keeping Rick on the leash, the single object that made the whole threat work, was gone before Evil Morty even finished his drink. The hostage situation had quietly ended. Evil Morty was sitting there giving orders to a man who was no longer trapped, holding power he no longer had, completely unaware that the ground had already moved under him. Rick reveals the truth with obvious delight, because for Rick, this is the best kind of win, the kind where the enemy never saw it coming. He had used the forced team-up as cover. Every step that looked like obedience was really a way to get close enough to do what needed doing. And the hardest part of the trick was that Rick had to do it without anyone knowing, which meant using Morty as part of the plan without telling him. Morty thought he was being dragged along, scared and confused, the way he usually is. In truth, his fear and his cluelessness were exactly what sold the act. Evil Morty believed Rick was cornered, partly because Morty believed it too, and Morty believed it because Rick never told him the truth. There is a cost hidden in that cleverness, and the episode does not pretend otherwise. Rick used his grandson again. He let Morty walk through real fear, let him feel small and helpless and replaced, all so the con would look convincing. The plan worked, the family was saved, and Morty was once more a piece on Rick's board, rather than a person Rick trusted with the truth. The good outcome does not erase the old wound. It pokes right at it. For a grandfather who keeps promising to do better, using the boy as bait, even to protect him, is the same lonely habit dressed up in a happy ending. The diner scene carries another quiet thread, one that lives in Morty rather than in Rick. Watching Rick and Evil Morty trade words across the table, Morty starts to feel something that bothers him deeply. He gets the sense that a part of Evil Morty actually wants Rick's attention, that this dark version of himself is not only after power, but is, in some strange way, trying to take Rick from him. Whether that is truly what Evil Morty wants is left unclear, and the show does not spell it out. What matters is that Morty believes it. The boy who already fears he is replaceable now watches 2 of the most important figures in his life seem to enjoy each other's company, and the fear digs in deeper. He does not just want to beat Evil Morty. He wants to prove that he is the Morty who belongs at Rick's side. The con also answers, at least for now, the big question the season opened with. The peaceful, softer Rick raised a worry. If Rick had truly changed, if he had become gentle and open and honest, could he still be the man who outsmarts every enemy in the room? The escape from Evil Morty gives a clear reply. The old Rick is still completely there. The brilliance, the nerve, the willingness to play a long and lonely game, none of it went anywhere. The change did not weaken him. It only pointed his sharpest instincts at a new purpose, which is keeping the family alive rather than chasing his own ghosts. That is a meaningful shift, even if Rick's methods stayed the same. In the old days, a plan this clever might have been about revenge, or pride, or proving he was the smartest thing across all the worlds. Here, it is about protection. Rick walked willingly into a cage and let his worst enemy think he held the keys, all so that the people in that house could keep enjoying their pool and their slow mornings without ever knowing how close they came to being erased. The trick is classic Rick. The reason behind it belongs to the new one. Still, a destroyed weapon is not a finished fight. Evil Morty is not the kind of enemy who shrugs and walks away after being outplayed. He spent the whole episode believing he had Rick beaten, and learning the truth at that diner table does not make him give up. It makes him furious. The leash is gone, the hostages no longer matter, and the careful balance that kept the peace has snapped. Whatever happens next will not be quiet. A man like Evil Morty, embarrassed and stripped of his power, becomes far more dangerous than he was when he held all the cards. Rick understood this, which is why his plan did not end with the destroying the device. He knew that taking away Evil Morty's weapon would not end the threat. It would only change its shape. So he prepared for what was coming. He built a place to make his stand, a whole hidden world of his own design, made to draw Evil Morty in and to give Rick every advantage when the real fight began. He had thought past the escape and into the war that the escape would start. The episode, by this point, has already flipped itself twice.
It began as a hostage story, with Rick trapped and the family in danger. It turned into a buddy story, with Rick and Evil Morty oddly matched against a bigger threat. Then it cracked open into a con, with Rick revealed as the one who had been in control all along. Each turn reset the meaning of the one before it, which keeps the whole thing feeling alive and impossible to predict. The calm Rick was a lie. The team-up was a lie. Even the diner, that small moment of false peace, was just the last quiet beat before everything came apart. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What started as a man with 2 terrible doors and no way out has become a man who quietly built a 3rd door and walked through it while no one was looking. The trap meant to hold Rick had a trap of its own folded inside it, and the spring is about to snap shut. Evil Morty is loose, weaponless, and angrier than he has ever been, and he is heading straight for the world Rick built to receive him. The piece is finished. The con is over. And the moment Evil Morty steps into that hidden world, the most furious fight the show has ever staged is ready to begin, with the whole family about to be pulled into it in a way they never have before. Section 4. The family joins the fight. Destroying the weapon did not end the danger. It only changed its shape. Evil Morty had spent the whole episode believing he held all the power, and learning the truth at that diner table turned his calm into something cold and furious. The leash was gone. The hostages no longer meant anything. The careful balance that had kept Rick obedient snapped in a single moment, and what followed was the part Rick had quietly been getting ready for all along. An enemy who feels safe is dangerous enough. An enemy who has just been outsmarted, stripped of everything, and made to look like a fool is far worse, because that kind of enemy stops being careful. Evil Morty came after Rick with nothing left to lose, and that was the exact fight Rick had built his hidden world to hold. That hidden world was the trap Rick had been laying the whole time. While Evil Morty thought he was giving orders to a beaten man, Rick was building a place of his own, a separate world, made from the ground up to serve as a battlefield. Every part of it was shaped to give Rick the upper hand. So when Evil Morty came charging in for his revenge, he was not attacking Rick on neutral ground. He was walking into a stage that Rick had designed for this exact moment, a place where Rick knew every corner and every rule, because he had made them all himself. What happened inside that world became the wildest fight the show has ever put on screen. Rick and Evil Morty went at each other with everything they had, and the world around them paid the price. They tore the place apart over and over, breaking the whole world to pieces and somehow keeping going through the wreckage. The fight did not stay in one room or one shape. It rolled and smashed across the entire hidden world, leveling it again and again. 2 of the smartest and most dangerous beings across all the worlds throwing every trick they owned at each other, with no rule left standing. Evil Morty did not come empty-handed. One of his nastiest tools was a laser he could fire straight out of the palm of his hand, a blast powerful enough to punch through almost any shield or wall Rick threw up to block it. It gave him a weapon he could never be disarmed of, because it was a part of his own body. Whenever Rick built a defense, that palm blast could cut right through it. The fight stayed close partly because of this, since Evil Morty could answer nearly anything Rick did with a burst of light strong enough to break through it. Rick had a new trick of his own, and this one came as a real shock. Somewhere along the way, in the time between his last big fight and now, Rick had given his body the power to heal itself. During the battle, he took wounds that should have killed him on the spot. He was torn apart. At one point, Evil Morty even cut Rick's brain out of his own skull, the sort of injury that ends any normal living thing for good. And Rick kept coming. His body knit itself back together again and again, shrugging off damage that would have finished almost anyone else across the worlds. The fight could go as far as it did precisely because Rick had quietly made himself nearly impossible to kill. The strange part is that the show never stops to explain where this healing power came from. Rick simply has it now, and it happens to work about as well as the healing power once held by Rick Prime, the very enemy Rick spent so long chasing. That detail is left hanging on purpose. A small mystery dropped right in the middle of the action. A man who just beat his greatest foe now carries a power that looks a lot like that foe's. The episode does not say how, or when, or what it cost. It lets the question sit there, quiet and unanswered, while the fists keep flying. For all his cleverness and all his healing, though, Rick could not finish Evil Morty alone. The two were
too evenly matched. Every move Rick made, Evil Morty had an answer for. Every wound Rick took, he healed, but healing is not the same as winning. The fight reached the kind of standstill where neither side can land the final blow. Two perfect rivals locked together, each too smart and too stubborn to fall. If the battle had stayed 1 against 1, it might have gone on forever, with the hidden world crumbling around two enemies who simply would not stop. So Rick did the one thing he had refused to do for the entire episode. He brought in the family. This is a bigger deal than it might sound, because of how Evil Morty had always worked before. In every past run-in, Evil Morty dealt only with versions of Rick and Morty. The rest of the family was never part of his world. Beth, Jerry, and Summer did not even know he existed. To them, this dark version of Morty was not a famous enemy or an old story. He was a complete stranger, a name they had never heard, a danger they had no idea was hanging over their lives. That meant Rick had to stop and tell them the truth. The man who started the season hiding a phone in the garage, who carried the whole threat alone rather than worry them, finally sat his family down and explained everything. He told them who Evil Morty was. He told them what the weapon could do. He told them how close all of them had come to being erased from every world without ever knowing it. For Rick, opening up like that does not come easy. Every instinct in him says to handle it quietly and keep them out of it. This time, he chose the opposite, because the fight had grown too big for one person, and because some part of him had finally learned that the family is stronger when they know what they are facing. Once they knew, the family did not freeze or run, they stepped up. For the first time in the whole history of Evil Morty, the rest of the Smiths joined the fight against him. They were not bystanders waiting to be rescued, and they were not hostages this time. They became part of the team that meant to take him down. The danger that had been kept secret from them became a danger they got to face head-on together, which is something the show had never once allowed before. The turning point came when Evil Morty broke into the house. He came in expecting more of the same, ready to deal with Rick and Morty the way he always had. Instead, the whole family was waiting, and they jumped him all at once. There is a real thrill in watching ordinary Beth and clumsy Jerry and sharp-tongued Summer pile onto the most dangerous version of Morty across the worlds, because none of them are supposed to be a match for him. They are not geniuses or fighters. They are a family that has finally been let in on the truth, and that knowledge alone makes them useful in a way they never could have been while Rick kept them in the dark. Even Evil Morty's deadliest weapon worked against him in that moment. When he fired off his palm blast, the powerful laser from his hand, the move left a small gap right after, a short window where he could not fire again. The family spotted that gap and used it. During the cooldown after the blast, when Evil Morty was open and unable to defend, the whole family jumped him and beat him down together. The very weapon that made him so hard to fight gave them the opening they needed, as long as enough of them were there to take it. One person could not have done it. A whole family could. That detail quietly answers the fear that has been chewing at Morty since the first scene. All episode long, Morty worried that he was replaceable, that a smarter and sharper version of himself could simply take his place at Rick's side. The ending pushes back on that worry, in the gentlest way. What finally helps bring Evil Morty down is not a better Morty or a smarter Rick. It is the family, the messy and ordinary people Evil Morty always looked down on and left out of his plans. The thing Evil Morty never understood and never had turned out to be the thing that beat him. This is where the whole episode quietly comes together. It opened with Rick hiding everything, carrying his burden alone, treating his family like people who needed to be shielded from the truth. It ends with Rick telling them everything and fighting beside them. Inside a single episode, Rick travels the full distance from the lonely man in the garage to the grandfather who lets his family stand with him. The change he kept promising shows up not in a speech, but in the simple act of trusting them enough to bring them into the most dangerous fight of his life. There is real warmth buried under all the wreckage and the lasers. The family that Rick spent the whole episode protecting in secret became the very thing that saved him. The people he tried to keep safe by keeping them ignorant turned out to be strongest when he finally let them know the truth. For a show that often laughs at how broken this family is, the moment they all pile onto a common enemy together is its own kind of victory, separate from who wins the fight. They stopped being Rick's weakness. They became his backup. Yet even with the whole family on him, even cornered and swarmed and beaten down, Evil Morty was not the type to go quietly. He has always had one more trick, one more escape, one more clever move tucked away for the moment everything falls apart. As the family closed in and it looked like the fight was finally over, Evil Morty reached for a last device. Something meant to flip the board one more time and snatch a win out of total defeat. The fight was not finished. It was about to take one final, sudden turn. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And the thing that decided it did not come from Rick, or from Morty, or from the family at all. It came from a forgotten corner of the show's own past, a strange piece of its history that almost nobody expected to ever matter again, arriving at the exact right second to settle the question of evil Morty once and for all. Section 5. The oldest rule catches up. The family had evil Morty surrounded. He had been swarmed, beaten down, and stripped of every advantage he walked in with. For almost any other enemy, that would have been the end. Evil Morty is not almost any other enemy. All through the series, he has been the one character who always keeps a final move tucked away, the one who turns a sure loss into a clean escape at the last second. So even pinned down by the whole family, he reached for one more trick, and this one was meant to flip the entire fight in a single stroke. The trick was a device that freezes time. With the family closing in on him, evil Morty stopped the clock on everyone but himself. Time froze. The family went still, and evil Morty was suddenly free to move while no one else could. He lined up the killing blow, ready to end Rick once and for all, while the world sat frozen around him. In that moment, he looked like he had won, again, the way he always seems to right before he slips away. A frozen world, a helpless target, and the smartest villain across all the worlds standing over them with all the time he needed. And that very move, the freezing of time, turned out to be the worst mistake he could have made. Messing with time is not a small thing in this show. It is one of the few crimes the universe itself seems to keep watch over. Long ago, way back in an early season, Rick broke the rules of time and drew the attention of a strange group of officers whose whole job is to guard time and punish anyone who tampers with it. Those officers had not been seen or thought about in years. Most people watching had probably forgotten they ever existed. The show remembered. To understand why their return hit so hard, it helps to remember where they came from. Years earlier in the show, back in an early season, Rick once froze time to clean up a mess and left the flow of time cracked and broken behind him. That careless act pulled in these very officers, who treat the timeline the way park rangers treat a forest, watching for anyone who damages it. They showed up, sorted out the damage, and then disappeared from the story for what felt like forever. They were a one-time joke from long ago, the kind of small detail a show usually drops and never thinks about again. Bringing them back this many seasons later, at the exact right second, rewards the fans who never forgot them, and quietly proves the show keeps track of its own rules. The instant evil Morty froze time to land his final blow, he broke the one rule those officers exist to enforce, so they came. Out of nowhere, at the last possible second, the time police arrived and arrested evil Morty for his crimes against the rules of time. The killing blow never landed. The frozen world thawed. The villain, who had spent the entire episode 3 steps ahead of everyone, was suddenly in handcuffs, dragged off by a force that had nothing to do with Rick or Morty or the family at all. The most dangerous version of Morty was undone by a parking ticket from the universe. What makes this ending so satisfying is how it fits the shape of the whole episode. All through the story, the biggest threats are beaten by their own tools. The world-eating creature was defeated by being made to eat itself. The palm blast that made evil Morty so hard to fight left a gap that the family used to bring him down. Now, the very trick evil Morty reached for to win, the freezing of time, is the exact crime that called down the officers who arrested him. He did not lose because someone outmuscled him. He lost because the move he trusted most was the move that doomed him. Across the episode, again and again, the thing that should have been a strength becomes the reason for the fall. That pattern is the secret spine of the whole episode, and it is worth sitting with for a second. 3 different threats, 3 different shapes of danger, and all 3 fall the same way, each one swallowed by its own greatest power. A show could easily treat that as a coincidence. This one builds it on purpose, so that by the time evil Morty freezes time and the officers appear, the ending feels less like luck and more like a rule of the world finally snapping shut. The cleverness of the writing is that the audience may not even notice the pattern while it happens. It just feels right, and the reason it feels right is that the episode has been quietly teaching it the whole time. There is a quiet kind of justice in that idea, and the show seems to enjoy it. Evil Morty has always believed he is smarter than everyone, that he can see further down the road than any Rick or any Morty. His whole identity is built on staying one step ahead, so the perfect way to finally catch him is with a rule he never bothered to think about, a corner of the universe so old and so forgotten that even the audience let it slip from memory. The genius who plans for everything got tripped by a thing he did not plan for at all. For Morty, the arrest is a moment of pure relief and even a little joy. He watches his dark double get hauled away and celebrates that evil Morty is off the board for good. After a whole episode of feeling small, feeling replaceable, Feeling like he had to prove he was the Morty who belonged at Rick's side, he gets to see the source of all that fear carted off by the time police. The version of himself that haunted him is gone. For Morty, who started the day worried he could be swapped out and forgotten, watching evil Morty lose everything is a strange sort of healing. Rick, on the other hand, does not throw a party. After surviving a fight that tore him apart and put his brain back together more than once, after carrying a deadly secret for who knows how long, after building a whole hidden world just to win, Rick reacts the way an exhausted person reacts. He says he needs a vacation. There is something very human in that small line. The smartest being across all the worlds, fresh off beating his greatest living rival, does not want a victory lap. He just wants to rest. The weight he carried through the whole episode shows up right there in a tired man who is simply done. That tired little line also points at something the season can never really hand him. Rick wants rest, but a show needs trouble, and a man who keeps building weapons and bending the rules of reality is never going to be left alone for long. The vacation he asks for is the kind a person in this family never actually gets. Even as he says it, the credits are about to reveal his greatest enemy, still alive in a cell. The family is freshly tangled in a war they only just learned about, and a dozen older dangers are still out there somewhere, waiting. Rick wishing for a quiet break is almost funny on its own, because the world he lives in has never once allowed him one, and this new season shows no early sign of breaking that streak. The episode does not quite let the win sit clean, though. After everything wraps up, a final scene plays during the credits, and it lands with a dark little smile. Evil Morty is shown locked away in a time prison, the place the officers take their captives. The joke is that this special prison, built to hold criminals who break the rules of time, looks exactly as gray and grim and boring as any regular prison. All that power, all that cleverness, all those years of being the smartest villain in the room, and evil Morty ends up in a plain cell that could belong to anyone. The grand enemy gets the least grand ending imaginable. That image does a lot of quiet work. Evil Morty spent his whole existence trying to escape the role he was born into, trying to break free of being just another Morty in an endless line of Mortys. He wanted out of the system so badly that he built his entire life around beating it, and the place he lands is a cage that looks like every other cage. A dull room no different from the prisons that hold ordinary crooks. The character who refused to be ordinary is left in the most ordinary place there is. His ending is not a blaze of glory. It is a shrug. The way the show flips from a brutal fight to a flat little joke is a trick it has always done well. One moment Rick is having his brain cut out and a whole family is brawling for their lives, and the next the tone drops into something almost silly, a tired man asking for a vacation and a famous villain stuck in a boring cell. That sudden swing from huge stakes to small comedy is the show's signature sound. It keeps the heavy moments from feeling too heavy and the jokes from feeling cheap, because each one is sitting right next to its opposite. The ending of this episode rides that swing perfectly, ending one of its biggest stories with one of its quietest punchlines. Pulling back, the whole episode reads like a complete story in a single sitting, which is rare and impressive for a season opener. It begins with a hidden phone and a quiet fear, and ends with a forgotten rule and a gray cell. In between, it manages to reopen the show's biggest dangling thread, bring back its most famous villain, stage its wildest fight, and bring the entire family together against a common enemy for the first time. Most shows would stretch all of that across half a season. This one packs it into one episode and still finds room to breathe. The ending also quietly closes the loop on the season's opening question. The story started by asking whether Rick had really changed, or whether the softer Rick was just a better mask. By the final scene, the answer leans toward real change. Even if Rick's methods stayed sharp and sneaky, he still ran a con, he still kept secrets, he still played his grandson like a card. Yet, when the fight grew too big, he chose to trust his family with the truth and let them stand beside him, which is the exact thing the old Rick never would have done. The man who began the episode hiding in the garage ended it fighting shoulder to shoulder with the people he once tried to shield through silence. Morty's arc lands too, in its own gentle way. His fear of being replaceable drove him through the whole episode, and the ending answers it without ever making a speech about it. The thing that beat evil Morty was not a smarter Morty or a better grandson, it was the family, all of them together, the messy, ordinary people that evil Morty always dismissed. Morty did not need to prove he was special by being more clever than his dark double. He just needed to be part of something evil Morty never had, and never understood, and could never build for himself. For the rest of the family, the episode marks a real change in their place in the story. Beth, Jerry, and Summer began as people who did not even know evil Morty existed, kept far away from the danger by a Rick Rick who wanted them safe and ignorant. By the end, they had jumped into the biggest fight of the season and helped win it. They stopped being the people who get rescued and became people who help do the rescuing. That shift matters because it suggests the show is willing to let the whole family carry weight rather than leaving every important moment to Rick and Morty alone. And yet, for all the clean wrapping, anyone who knows this show should feel a small itch at the back of the mind. Evil Morty is in a cell. He is called gone, off the board for good. Morty believes it. The credits roll on him sitting in that gray little prison, beaten and caught and finished. But this is a show that has made a habit of bringing back the characters it claims are gone, sometimes seasons later, often when no one expects it. Evil Morty himself is the best proof of that. He first showed up way back in the first season as a small, creepy mystery, then disappeared without an answer, then came roaring back much later in the third season as a far bigger threat than anyone guessed. The show let him sit forgotten for years before making him its biggest villain. A prison cell is not a grave. The time police took him alive, locked him away in a place that exists somewhere out in the wide, strange machinery of the universe, and a locked door is the kind of thing a clever enough mind can eventually find its way through. The show went out of its way to keep Evil Morty breathing rather than killing him off, and on this series, keeping a villain alive is rarely an accident. It is usually a promise. The door that closed on Evil Morty may simply be a door the show plans to open again. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That habit, the way nobody on this show ever truly stays gone, runs much deeper than a single villain in a single cell. Across its whole run, the series has built up a pile of loose ends, forgotten faces, and unfinished stories, all of them just sitting there, waiting. Some are old friends, some are old wounds. Some are mysteries the show set up years ago and quietly walked away from, trusting that one day the right moment would come to pick them back up. The series treats its own past like a stocked shelf, leaving things there on purpose, knowing exactly where each one sits for the day it wants to reach back and grab one. Evil Morty getting a second life is only the beginning of the question. The bigger question is which of all those waiting threads this new season might decide to pull next, and which long-buried piece of the show's past is sitting closest to the surface, ready to return. Section 6. The wife he locked away. Of all the loose threads waiting in the show's past, one sits closer to the surface than any other, because it comes from the season that aired right before this one. It also happens to touch the deepest wound the whole series has ever had. To understand why it matters so much, the story has to circle back to a name that has shaped everything Rick is, a name that has already echoed through the danger of season 9 without most viewers even noticing. That name is Diane. She was Rick's wife, and her death is the single event the entire show grew out of. Rick did not simply lose her in one ordinary tragedy. The version of Rick at the center of this series lost her in the worst way imaginable, killed by Rick Prime, in a strike that erased her across every world at once. The same monstrous trick the Omega device copied in the season opener. There was no other world for Rick to flee to where Diane was still alive, because Prime made sure of it. Every Rick across the worlds who lost their Diane that day became the same broken, bitter man, and the one at the heart of this show became the worst of them. His drinking, his cruelty, his coldness, all of it traces back to that loss. The show has been careful with this over the years, doling it out in small pieces rather than one big flashback, so that the full shape of the wound only came clear slowly. A picture in an old friend's home, a name Rick refused to say, a look on his face whenever the subject drifted too close. For most of the series, Diane was less a character and more a shadow, a thing the show pointed at without ever showing directly. That long silence is part of why her return in any form carries so much weight. The audience spent seasons learning to feel her absence before the show ever dared to bring her back. So Diane is not a small piece of the show's history. She is the engine under the whole thing. And the season that came right before season 9 reached back and pulled her out of the past in a way the show had never done before, which is exactly why it left such a loaded thread hanging. The trouble started with a saved copy of Rick himself. Years back, a younger version of Rick had been preserved, a recording of his mind from long ago, kept alive in a strange digital form. That saved copy slipped loose. First, it crept into Jerry's head, planting warm, false memories of Rick as a kind and loving father, the sort of parent the real Rick never managed to be. When the real Rick found this copy hiding in Jerry's mind, he pulled it out and shut it away inside a tiny digital world he built to hold it, a little glass box of a place where a trapped mind could live but could not escape, or so Rick thought. The copy did not stay put. It built itself a way out of that little prison and found a new place to hide, and the place it chose was the worst possible one. It slipped into Beth's mind. Once inside her head, the copy of Rick set to work doing the thing it wanted most. It built her
her a better childhood. It filled her memories with a version of Rick who was present and gentle and loving, a father who never left, and it placed beside him a recreated version of Diane, a memory of the mother Beth barely got to know. Inside her own head, Beth was handed the family she always wished she had. This is where the story turns from clever to heartbreaking. The fake memories felt real, and they started to change how Beth acted in her actual life. She began drifting away from her real family, pulled toward the perfect past that had been planted in her. The closer she held the dream, the further she got from the people around her. When her own double, the other Beth who travels space, noticed something was deeply wrong and tried to step in, the two of them came to blows, and the space-traveling Beth was hurt so badly she nearly did not survive. The lie growing inside Beth's mind had become strong enough to turn one version of her against another. That fight between the two Beths is its own kind of horror, because it shows what these false memories can do. A person can be turned into a weapon against herself simply by handing her a sweeter past than the one she actually lived. The whole season had been poking at this fear, the idea that a mind can be edited, that memories can be added or removed, that the self a person trusts might be something built by someone else. Beth attacking her own double is the moment that fear stops being an idea and becomes a fist. Beth herself sank lower and lower, lost in a world that was not real, until she reached a breaking point so dark that she nearly gave up entirely. It is one of the most painful moments the show has ever put on screen. A woman so tangled in false comfort and real pain that she almost let go of everything. And this is the moment that reveals how much Rick has changed, because of how he chose to save her. The old Rick would have fixed the problem with a gadget and a smug speech. This Rick went in after her. He climbed into her mind, found her in the wreckage of the false world, and pulled her back from the edge himself. Not with a clever trick, but by simply being there, by talking to her, by making himself available to his daughter in a way he had spent her whole life refusing to do. He reached her. He brought her back. The fix was not a machine. It was a father finally showing up. Once Beth was safe, Rick had to clean up what the copy had done, and the choices he made there are the heart of the dangling thread. He reset Beth's mind, smoothing away the false memories and the trauma of what had happened, so that she could go on without carrying the full weight of it. Then he turned to the copy of himself and the recreated Diane it had built. He could have destroyed them. He did not. Instead, he sealed them both back inside that little digital world, the saved Rick and the memory of his wife, locked away together in a box. And then Rick did the strangest, saddest thing of all. He erased his own knowledge that any of it existed. He wiped from his own mind the fact that a version of Diane was sitting in that box, alive in her small digital way, within his reach. He chose to forget that she was there at all. He left himself a warning that any future tampering would destroy the whole thing, and then he walked away from the memory of doing it, so that even he would not be tempted to go back. Sitting with that choice for a moment shows just how deep Rick's pain runs. He cannot let Diane go. After everything, after all the worlds and all the years, he still could not bring himself to simply delete the recreated version of his wife, but he also cannot live with her. A copy of Diane in a box is not the woman he lost. It is a reminder that walks and talks, a ghost that would haunt him every single day if he let himself remember it was there. So he found a third path, the only one a man this broken could take. He kept her and he forgot her. He locked the door and threw away the memory of the key. Strip away the science fiction, and the choice is painfully human. Plenty of grieving people keep a box they cannot open, a drawer they will not look in, a thing too precious to throw out and too painful to face. Rick simply did it on the scale only he can manage. He turned his grief into a sealed container, and then made himself forget the container exists, which is the most Rick way imaginable of dealing with a feeling he cannot survive head-on. For the family, the finale left things quietly broken. Beth was saved, but the trust between her and Rick had been damaged once more. She had lived through a stretch where her own memories and feelings were not her own, where she could not tell what was real. And even after the reset, a person does not walk away from something like that unchanged. The whole family had spent the season circling questions of memory and identity, of who they are when their own minds can be edited, and the finale did not hand them a clean answer. It left them living on top of a pile of memories that may or may not be true. This is the thread that hangs over season 9 more heavily than any other, because it is the freshest and the most personal. A recreated Diane is sitting in a box somewhere, real enough to matter, hidden even from the one man who would do anything to reach her. Rick does not remember she is there. The audience does. That gap between what
what Rick has forgotten and what the viewers know is exactly the kind of loaded gun the show loves to leave on the table. A secret that the hero himself does not know he is keeping is a secret begging to come back out. It also ties straight into the danger of the new season. The Omega device worked by erasing a person across every world, the same way Diane was erased. Now here is Rick, choosing on his own to erase a piece of his own past, to wipe a person out of his awareness because the pain of remembering is too much. The show keeps circling the same terrible idea from different angles, asking again and again whether erasing something truly makes it gone or whether it just hides, waiting until it forces its way back into the light. Diane was erased by an enemy. Now a memory of her has been erased by Rick himself. The question the season seems to be building toward is whether anything in this show ever truly stays erased. By this point in the series, a pattern in Rick has become hard to miss.
When a feeling is too big for him, his answer is almost always to delete it, to wall it off, to make it disappear rather than sit with it. He erased his own awareness of Diane's box. He reset Beth's mind to spare her the pain. He has spent seasons treating memory like something that can be cut away whenever it hurts too much. The finale quietly asks whether that ever actually works, or whether the deleted thing simply waits in the dark, growing heavier the longer it is ignored. A whole family now walks around with edited minds, unsure which of their own memories were placed there by someone else, and none of them fully aware of how much has been quietly rewritten. Knowing the show's habits, that little box does not feel closed for good. The series spent a whole season building toward Rick locking his greatest pain away and choosing to forget it, and shows do not spend that kind of effort on a door they never plan to open again. Every piece of it points forward. A recreated wife, a forgetting that the hero does not know he performed, a warning Rick left for a future version of himself. All of it sits there like a story only half told. The setup is too rich and too deliberate to be an ending. If and when that thread gets pulled, it could reshape the whole family. A returning Diane, even a copied one, would force Rick to face the loss he has spent the entire series running from. It would put Beth in front of the mother she never really had. It would test, in the most direct way possible, whether the softer and more open Rick from the recent seasons is strong enough to handle the one thing that broke him in the first place. It would also force the show to decide what it believes about grief. For years, it is hinted that some losses cannot be fixed, only carried. A returning Diane would put that idea on trial, asking whether a second chance with a copy could ever heal a wound this deep, or whether it would tear it open in a fresh and crueler way. The biggest danger to Rick may not be another villain with another weapon. It may be a quiet box he forgot he sealed, holding the only person who ever truly undid him. There is also the matter of the warning Rick left behind, the note that any meddling would destroy the box and everything in it. A warning like that exists for one reason, which is that someone, someday, is expected to come poking at the thing it guards. It might be Rick himself, stumbling back onto a secret he buried. It might be Beth, who now carries her own questions about what was done to her mind. It might be some new threat that learns the box exists and tries to use it as leverage, the way evil Morty used the family as leverage in the opener. A locked door with a warning sign is practically an invitation, and this show rarely leaves an invitation unanswered for long. For now, though, that box sits in the dark, its secret kept even from the man who hid it. Season 9 has not opened it yet. The thread is there, loaded and waiting, the closest piece of the show's buried past to the surface, ready for the moment the writers decide the time is right. It is the kind of thread that does not need to scream to be felt. It just has to sit there, quietly, while everyone slowly remembers it is still unresolved. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The finale that buried Diane's memory in Rick's mind did not stop with one secret, though. In its very last seconds, after the heavy story had wrapped and the family seemed safe, the show planted a second seed, a small and strange and almost throwaway scene aimed at the one member of the family circle that everyone has always trusted without question. And that quiet final beat may be hiding a threat the family never saw coming. Section 7. The friend who might be fake. The second seed the finale planted is easy to miss, and it is aimed at a character almost nobody would ever think to worry about. To feel the full weight of it, the story has to step back and explain who that character is, because his whole history makes this one short scene land like a quiet alarm bell. His name is Mr. Poopy Butthole, and despite the silly name, he is one of the most beloved figures in the entire show. He is an old family friend, a small, round creature who has been close to the Smiths for years. His trademark is that he often speaks straight to the audience during the scenes that play over the credits, checking in like a warm host, asking how everyone is doing, giving little updates on his life.
For a show that is usually cold and sharp, Mr. Poopy Butthole is one of the few characters allowed to just be sweet. The audience trusts him. The family trusts him. He has always felt like the one safe, kind presence in a world full of monsters and liars. What makes the new scene so unsettling is the one episode that made Mr. Poopy Butthole famous in the first place. Way back in an early season, the show did an episode all about telling real family members from fake ones. In that story, strange alien creatures had quietly slipped into the house. These creatures had a special and terrifying power. They could plant fake happy memories in everyone's heads so that the whole family believed these strangers had always been part of their lives.
The house filled up with cheerful new faces, each one feeling like an old friend, none of them real.
The family eventually worked out the one rule that could save them. The fake creatures could only create pleasant memories. Every memory tied to them was happy, fond, warm. So the family realized that anyone they only had good memories about was probably a fake, while anyone they had at least one truly bad or annoying or painful memory about had to be real, because the creatures simply could not make those kinds of memories. Armed with that rule, the family began clearing the house, getting rid of anyone who came with nothing but sunshine attached. Mr. Poopy Butthole got caught in that purge. The family looked at him, searched their memories, and found only good ones. By their own rule, that made him a fake, one of the creatures wearing a friendly face. So Beth shot him. And then came the twist that made him a legend. He bled. He bled real blood, the way the fake creatures never could, which proved that he had been real the entire time. He was a true friend who had been part of their lives for years, and the family had nearly killed him because all of their memories of him happened to be kind ones. He survived, but he was hurt, and he left wounded and quietly heartbroken that the people he loved had turned on him so fast. The moment stuck with fans for years afterward. In the scenes that followed, Mr. Poopy Butthole spoke to the audience while he recovered, half joking and half wounded, and the show kept checking in on him long after that episode ended. He became a kind of running symbol, the friend who had bled to prove he was real, returning every so often in credit scenes to remind everyone that he was still around, still part of the family, still genuine. The show leaned on him as its proof that not everything in this world is a trick. Every time he appeared and waved at the camera, he was quietly carrying that history with him. That is the history sitting underneath the new scene, and it is what makes the scene so chilling. Mr. Poopy Butthole is the character whose entire claim to fame is proving that he was real. He is the one who bled to show he belonged. He is the living answer to the question of who is genuine and who is fake. He earned his place in the family the hard way, by nearly dying to prove he was not an imposter. So when the most recent finale ends with a short scene during the credits showing scientists examining Mr. Poopy Butthole and suspecting that he has been replaced by an imposter, the ground shifts. The one character who already proved he was real is now under suspicion of being fake. The very figure the show used all those years ago to settle the question of trust is suddenly the center of that question again. Whatever those scientists found, the show left it hanging. The scene plays, the suspicion lands, and then the credits end without an answer. The placement of the scene is part of its power. It comes after the heavy main story has wrapped, after Beth has been saved and the family seems safe, in the kind of light credit moment that usually belongs to a joke. Mr. Poopy Butthole is exactly the character who normally fills those moments with warmth, so using his slot to plant dread instead is a sharp choice. The audience is trained to relax during his scenes. This time, the show used that trained comfort against everyone, slipping a knife into the one moment people expected to feel safe. There is real cleverness in how quietly it is done. The scene does not shout, it does not explain, it simply shows the suspicion and walks away, trusting the audience to feel the chill on their own. For longtime fans, the weight is enormous, because they remember the Parasite episode, and they understand exactly what an imposter question means for this character. For newer viewers, it plays as a small, odd moment. The show layered it so that the people who know the history feel the full punch, while everyone else just senses that something is slightly off. Underneath the scene sits a fear that runs through the whole recent stretch of the show. The season before season 9 was soaked in questions of memory and identity, of edited minds and false pasts, of not being able to trust what is in your own head. Diane was rebuilt from memory and locked in a box. Beth's mind was filled with a fake childhood. Jerry's head was used as a hiding place for a copy of Rick. Over and over, the season asked the same haunting question. How do you know the people around you are who they say they are? How do you know your own memories are true? The Mr. Poopy Butthole scene is that exact fear pointed at the one person no one ever thought to doubt. If even Mr. Poopy Butthole can be questioned, then nobody in the family circle is safe from the doubt. He was the proof that real friends exist, the character the show held up up as the answer to the imposter problem. Turning that proof into a new mystery quietly tells the audience that the ground under the whole family is less solid than it looks. The season spent 10 episodes teaching everyone to fear that the people they love might be fakes, and then, in its final seconds, it aimed that fear at the safest target it had. The theories about what this means split in a few directions, and the show has left room for all of them. One reading is the darkest. Maybe the warm, kind Mr. Poopy Butthole the family has known for years has already been swapped out for an imposter, and the scientists caught it. If that is true, then a fake has been sitting inside the family's circle, trusted completely, with no one the wiser. The character built to represent realness would become the perfect hidden threat, precisely because he is the last person anyone would suspect. A second reading flips it. Maybe Mr. Poopy Butthole is still entirely real, and the suspicion is wrong, the same way the family was wrong about him in the Parasite episode. If that happens, the show would be running its old trick again, accusing the one true friend of being fake, and the heartbreak of that first betrayal would echo all over again. The tragedy would not be a hidden monster. It would be a good creature wrongly doubted twice in one lifetime. A third reading is the one that turns him into a villain. The character has reasons to be bitter if he ever chose to act on them. He was shot by a family he loved. He was doubted, hurt, and left to recover alone. Over the years, there have been hints that his life has had its share of pain and disappointment behind the cheerful front he shows the audience. A friend who has been wronged that deeply, and who has spent years smiling through it, is exactly the kind of figure who could one day stop smiling. The imposter scene could be the first step toward revealing that the kindest face in the show has been hiding something much colder. A turn like that would hurt more than any ordinary villain reveal, because it would punish the audience for trusting. Most enemies in the show arrive already looking dangerous, so there is no real shock when they attack. Mr. Poopy Butthole is the opposite. Years of warmth and friendliness would have to curdle into something menacing, and all that goodwill would suddenly read as a long, patient act. The betrayal would not only land on the family, it would land on everyone who ever smiled back at him through the screen. Few shows have a character with enough stored-up affection to make a heel turn truly devastating, and Mr. Poopy Butthole has more of that affection than almost anyone. Spending it on a betrayal would be a heavy price, which is exactly why the possibility carries such a charge. What makes all of this work is that the show has earned every possible answer. Mr. Poopy Butthole has the history to be a tragic victim, the warmth to make a betrayal devastating, and the buried hurt to make a turn toward villainy believable. The single short scene does not pick a path. It just opens the door and lets the audience stare into the dark, and every direction it could lead is loaded with meaning because of everything that came before. That refusal to choose is its own kind of skill. A lesser show would have spelled out the answer, either confirming the threat or waving it away with a joke. This one trusts silence to do more work than any explanation could. By leaving the question open, it lets every viewer carry their own version of the dread, each one imagining the answer that scares them most. The mystery stays alive precisely because the show declined to solve it. Heading into season 9, this thread sits in a different spot than the Diane thread. The Diane secret is buried deep, hidden even from Rick, quiet and slow. The Mr. Poopy Butthole question is louder and closer to the everyday life of the family, because he is a figure who actually shows up, who talks to the audience, who could walk back into a credit scene at any time carrying his secret with him. Whenever he next appears, every viewer who remembers the finale will be watching him differently, searching his familiar face for any sign that the friend they trust is not the friend they think. The bond the audience has with him makes this even sharper. Because he talks straight to the viewers, people feel like they know him in a way they do not know the other characters. He has always seemed to be on the audience's side, a friendly guide who breaks through the screen to say hello. Taking that figure and wrapping him in doubt does not just threaten the family inside the show. It reaches out and unsettles the people watching, turning a trusted face into a small, private worry that follows them out of the episode. That shift in how the audience sees him may be the real point. Even if the show never fully resolves the question, it has already changed Mr. Poopy Butthole forever. He used to be the safe one, the warm one, the break from all the tension. Now, a small seed of doubt clings to him, and doubt like that is hard to shake. The show took its most comforting character and made him faintly frightening, all with a scene that lasted only a few seconds. That is a remarkable amount of damage to do with so little. It also fits a pattern the show keeps returning to in its recent years. The series has grown more and more interested in the idea that comfort itself can be a trap, that the warm and familiar things are exactly where danger likes to hide. A loving father planted in fake memories, a perfect childhood that nearly destroyed Beth, a trusted friend who might be a fake. Again and again, the recent show suggests that the things which feel the safest list are the ones most worth fearing. And the Mr. Poopy Butthole scene is that idea in its purest form. There is a reason that idea cuts so deep. The whole appeal of a warm presence is that it lets a person stop guarding themselves. Comfort works by lowering defenses. So a story that turns comfort into a threat is attacking people at the exact spot where they are least ready to be attacked. The show understands this, and it has gotten very good at letting the audience settle into a soft feeling before pulling the rug. Mr. Poopy Butthole, the softest feeling the show has, is the natural endpoint of that approach. For now, like the Diane box, the question simply waits. The scientists found whatever they found. The suspicion was planted, and the show, in its usual way, walked off without telling anyone the answer, leaving a small cold spot in the middle of all that warmth. Season 9 has not touched it yet. The thread is there, hanging, ready for the day the writers decide to either ease the fear or confirm it. Either way, the doubt has already done its quiet work, and that friendly face is changed for good. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. These two buried threads, the forgotten wife and the doubted friend, both grow out of the same recent obsession with memory and trust. But the show's longest threads reach back much further than the last season or two. Some of them have been hanging since the early years, tied to a character who was once one of the most important people in Rick's entire life. A friend Rick has already lost and already brought back from death once before, and whose story was left in a place far too fragile to be the end. Section 8. The friend Rick already buried once. The longest threads in this show do not come from last season. They reach all the way back to the early years, to a friendship that was there before the audience even understood how broken Rick really was. To follow this one, the story has to go back to the very first stretch of the series and meet the person who may be the closest friend Rick has ever had. His name is Bird Person, a tall, calm, bird-like alien who speaks slowly and means every word. He and Rick go back further than almost anyone. Long before the show began, the two of them fought side by side in a war against a giant space government, a power that ruled over much of the galaxy and crushed anyone who stood against it. Rick and Bird Person were rebels together, comrades in the fight, the kind of friends who had bled for the same cause. That history gives Bird Person a place in Rick's life that no one else holds. He knew Rick back when Rick still believed in something. He is a window into the man Rick used to be. The two of them were so close that they were once in a band together, along with another old friend, back in their rebel days. Picture that for a second. Rick, the man who now sneers at almost everything, used to play music with his friends between battles in a war he actually cared about winning. Bird Person was there for all of it. He saw a Rick who fought for a cause, who had partners he trusted, who had not yet shut the whole world out. That is a version of Rick the audience has only ever glimpsed in scraps, and Bird Person is the living keeper of it. To lose Bird Person is to lose the last witness to the good years. Bird Person first showed up at a party Rick threw, early in the series, where he was looking to start a new relationship after ending an old one. He found that new relationship with Tammy, a friend of Summer's from school. The two of them got close, stayed together, and eventually decided to marry. For a show that rarely lets anything sweet last, the romance between the steady old warrior and the cheerful young woman felt like a rare bit of hope. Their wedding was meant to be a celebration, a gathering of friends, a happy ending for a character who had earned one. The wedding became one of the cruelest turns the show has ever pulled. In the middle of the ceremony, Tammy revealed the truth. She had never been a normal girl. She was a deep cover agent for the very space government Rick and Bird Person had spent their lives fighting. The whole relationship, the whole engagement, the whole wedding, all of it had been a long con designed to trap Rick and everyone close to him. And to prove how cold the betrayal ran, Tammy killed Bird Person right there, gunning down her own groom in front of his friends. The man who had finally let himself hope for a happy life was murdered by the person he trusted most on the day that was supposed to be the best of his life. For a while, that looked like the end of Bird Person, and it was a brutal one. The show seemed to have killed off one of its most beloved characters in the most heartbreaking way possible. Death, though, turned out not to be the end. The space government got hold of what was left of Bird Person's body and did something monstrous with it. They rebuilt him, grafting cold machine parts onto the pieces of the friend Rick had lost, and they wiped away who he was, turning him into an obedient weapon. They gave this new creature a new name. Bird Person, the calm and thoughtful warrior, was gone, and in his place stood Phoenix Person, a brainwashed cyborg built to serve the very empire he had once fought. The friend became the enemy. Phoenix Person was no longer a person in any real sense, just a machine wearing the shape of someone Rick loved, programmed to obey orders and feel nothing. The space government had not only killed Bird Person, they had taken his corpse and turned it into a tool, a final final insult layered on top of the murder. For Rick, who had already lost almost everyone he ever cared about, this was a fresh kind of horror, a friend twisted into a thing. The two of them eventually came face to face again, and the meeting went as badly as it could. When Rick finally stood before the cyborg that used to be his best friend, he told him a hard truth, that Tammy was dead, killed in the fall of the Empire. The words snapped something loose in the machine. Phoenix Person flew into a rage and attacked, fighting Rick with everything he had, nearly killing him. The brainwashed weapon, still carrying some twisted echo of love for the woman who had betrayed him, tried to beat the life out of the only true friend he had left. Rick was saved only when the space-traveling Beth managed to reach the cyborg and shut him down, flipping a switch that powered the machine off. Most people would have left it there. Rick did not. He took what remained of Phoenix Person and brought the body home, keeping it in his garage, unwilling to let go even of the wreckage of his friend. For a long while, it simply sat there, a silent reminder of everything Rick had lost. And then Rick decided to do the impossible. He chose to try to bring Bird Person back. Not the cyborg weapon, but the real person buried somewhere underneath all that machinery and brainwashing. To do it, Rick rebuilt the body and then climbed inside Bird Person's mind. The episode where this happens plays out almost entirely inside Bird Person's memories, with Rick wandering through the recorded past of their friendship, searching for the real man hidden in there. It is a quiet, strange, deeply sad piece of the show, and it is voiced in part by one of the show's own creators, which gives it a personal weight. Inside that mind, Rick walks through their shared history, the war, the band they were once in together, the long years of friendship, all the things that made Bird Person who he was before the world broke him. What Rick found in there was a friend who did not want to come back. Bird Person, given the choice, preferred to stay inside his own memories, living in the past rather than waking up to a world that had only ever hurt him. He had been betrayed, murdered, rebuilt into a weapon, and forced to attack the people he loved. From inside his own head, the idea of returning to all that pain held no appeal. He would rather rest in the good memories than face the waking world again. It is one of the most honest portraits of deep exhaustion the show has ever offered. A person so worn down by suffering that even being alive feels like too much to ask. One thing, and only one thing, changed his mind. Rick revealed a secret that even Bird Person did not know. Tammy had secretly given birth to Bird Person's child, a daughter, a half-bird, half-human girl whose existence had been hidden, the memory of her buried away where Bird Person could not reach it. Learning that he had a daughter out there in the world gave Bird Person the one thing his own pain could not give him, a reason to live. For the sake of a child he had never met, he chose to wake up. He chose to come back from the edge of giving up, not for himself, but for her. Sitting with that is the heart of why this thread matters so much. The thing that pulled Bird Person back from wanting to disappear was family, a child, a reason outside himself. That is the same idea the whole show keeps circling. Broken people in this series are saved again and again, not by cleverness or power, but by the messy pull of the people they belong to. Beth was pulled back from her lowest point by a father finally showing up. Evil Morty was beaten by a family fighting together. And Bird Person, the oldest friend of all, was pulled back into living by the discovery of a daughter. The show keeps making the same quiet argument that connection is the only thing strong enough to beat despair. It also ties straight into the themes running through the most recent seasons. Bird Person's revival happened by digging through buried memories, by uncovering a truth that had been hidden inside a mind. The memory of his daughter had been suppressed, locked away, erased from his awareness, until Rick brought it back to the surface. That is the exact same shape as the Diane thread, where a memory of a lost love sits buried and forgotten, waiting to change everything if it ever resurfaces. The show told this story with Bird Person years before it told it with Diane, which suggests it is a pattern the writers return to on purpose. A hidden memory, a buried person, a truth that could pull someone back from the dead if only it came to light. For Rick, Bird Person is something no other character can be. He is the friend who knew Rick before the loss of Diane turned him cold. He is proof that Rick was once capable of real loyalty, real partnership, real love for someone outside his own family. Every other relationship Rick has is tangled up in guilt or control or distance. With Bird Person, there is something simpler underneath all the damage, an old bond between two people who once believed in the same fight. Saving Bird Person was, in a way, Rick trying to save a piece of his own better self, the part of him that existed before he gave up on everything. The fight between Rick and the brainwashed cyborg makes this even sadder in hindsight. When Phoenix Person attacked, he spat out that Rick had always been a bad friend, and the line stung because there was truth in it. Rick does ruin the people closest to him. His life is a storm, and the people who stand near him tend to get swept up and broken. him. So when Rick climbs into Bird Person's mind to save him, he is also arguing against that accusation, trying to prove to his friend and to himself that he is capable of being something better than the bad friend the cyborg called him. The trouble is that the story did not end cleanly. Bird Person chose to live, but he came back scarred, changed, and far from whole. He had every reason to be wary of Rick, who is, after all, the man whose chaotic life keeps dragging the people near him into ruin. The friend who came back is not the same friend who died at that wedding. He is someone who has been to the bottom and chosen to climb out for the sake of a daughter, carrying all his wounds with him. His new life, his attempt to be a father, his complicated feelings about Rick, all of it was set up and then left hanging, a story clearly meant to continue. That is what makes Bird Person such a loaded thread heading into the new season. There is a friend out there who once meant everything to Rick, now alive again, but distant, trying to build a life around a child. There is that daughter, a young half-bird girl who exists somewhere in the wide galaxy, barely explored, full of possibility. That child is a gift the show handed itself and has barely opened. She is tied by blood to two of the most painful stories in the series, the betrayal at the wedding and the friend rebuilt as a machine. She is half of a father who has died and returned, and half of a mother who was a traitor and a killer. A character built from those two halves could carry enormous weight, a living knot of everything that went wrong, and everything that might still go right. The show set her up and then tucked her away, leaving a whole person waiting in the wings. There is the deep, unfinished question of whether Rick and Bird Person can ever truly be friends again after everything, or whether too much has been broken. The show built all of this carefully, and then stepped away from it the way it so often does, trusting that the pieces would still be there when the right moment came. A returning Bird Person would bring Rick's distant past crashing into his present, the war, the rebellion, the version of himself he left behind. A returning daughter would give the show a brand new character tied directly to one of its most emotional arcs, and a real reckoning between the two old friends could finally answer whether the softer, more open Rick of recent seasons can repair the oldest and most damaged friendship he has. These are not small, loose ends. They are some of the richest, unfinished business the whole series has, and they sit at a perfect distance from the present, close enough that the show clearly cares about them, far enough that years can pass without a word. That gap is exactly where this series likes to keep its biggest payoffs, resting quietly until a season decides the moment has finally arrived to reach back and bring them roaring back into the wider story. Like the other buried threads, this one waits. Bird Person is alive, scarred, somewhere out there with a child, and a wrecked history, and a complicated link to the man who keeps saving him. The new season has not yet reached back for him, but the show has spent years proving that it never forgets these people, that the friends and enemies it sets aside are only ever resting, not gone. Bird Person has already died once and come back once. In a show this fond of second chances and buried truths, a third chapter feels less like a possibility and more like a promise the writers have simply not cashed in yet. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. All of these threads, the forgotten wife, the doubted friend, the warrior brought back from the dead, point to the same big question hanging over the whole season. With so much buried past sitting just under the surface, the real mystery is which of it the new season actually plans to dig up. And the first hints of the answer are not hidden at all. They have been sitting in plain sight since before the season even began, tucked into the simple list of names given to the episodes still waiting to air. Section 9. The map hidden in the names. Most shows keep their upcoming episodes a secret, dropping titles only days before each one airs. This show did the opposite. Before the new season even began, the whole list of episode names was made public, all 10 of them laid out in order. So while only the first episode has actually aired so far, the names of every episode still to come are already known. That list is the closest thing there is to a map of the season, and reading it carefully gives a few real clues about where things might be headed. The first thing that jumps out is that almost every title is a joke. They are puns, playful twists on the names of famous movies and shows, with the words bent to fit Rick or Morty into them. The second episode plays on the name of an old adventure movie about being stranded for several days and nights. Another bends the title of a famous action comedy about kung fu into a Rick-shaped version. One twists the name of a quiet, serious film about a river and a family. There is one built on the old movie about a dog that plays sports, with Jerry's name slipped into it. Another reshapes the name of a strange, unsettling black and white film. There is a spin on an animated movie about saving a rainforest, and a darker one playing on the title of a heavy heavy, famous film about lives falling apart. One borrows from an old kids' television show about summer camp. The pattern is clear and consistent. The season named its episodes like a long string of movie night jokes. This is not new for the show, to be fair. Its episode titles have almost always been puns, little wordplay jokes that twist a famous name into something with Rick or Morty stuffed inside. Fans have come to expect it, and half the fun of a new season is reading the title list and spotting which movies and shows got bent this time. So the joking names are partly just the show being itself. The clue is not that the titles are jokes, since they usually are. The clue is in which jokes were chosen, and in the one title that refused to be a joke at all. That choice actually tells us something about the mood the season is going for. A run of silly movie parody titles points toward a season built around big, wild, self-contained adventures. The kind where each episode picks a fresh idea and runs with it, rather than one long, heavy story stretched across all 10. This show has always been able to do both. Some seasons lean into deep, connected storytelling, while others feel more like a collection of separate, wild rides. The joking titles suggest that this run leans toward the second kind, a season of standalone swings, each one its own strange trip. The difference matters for how the season feels. A connected, serialized year tends to build dread, with each episode raising the stakes toward some big ending. A standalone year feels lighter and more relaxed, since each episode resets and starts fresh, free to be as weird as it wants without owing anything to the one before. Both styles have produced some of the show's best work. A playful, reset-every-week season is exactly the kind of place where the show drops its strangest, funniest, most creative single ideas. The episodes people quote for years. If that is what this run is, it promises a lot of fun, even if it goes light on the heavy threads. None of this is certain, of course, since a title is only a name, and the real episode could go anywhere. But naming choices are rarely an accident on a show this careful, and the overall feel of the list points toward fun over heaviness. One title breaks the pattern in a way worth paying attention to. The final episode of the season does not twist its name into a pun at all. It simply takes the exact title of a famous old film about a man who builds a baseball field after hearing a whisper telling him that doing so will bring something back. This is the first time in the entire history of the show that an episode has used the exact unchanged name of a real movie, with no joke folded into it. That break from the pattern is itself a kind of signal. When a show that puns on everything suddenly plays a title completely straight, it tends to mean that episode is doing something different, something more serious or more important than the playful ones around it. The movie that finale is named after is all about bringing something back, about a voice promising that if you build the right thing, the people you lost will return. For a season sitting on top of so many buried threads, a forgotten wife, a doubted friend, a warrior with a hidden daughter, a finale named after a story about the lost coming home is a tease that is hard to ignore. It might mean nothing. It might be the show simply liking the title. But on a series that loves to hide meaning in plain sight, a season-ending episode named after a story about reunion, placed at the end of a year full of buried people, feels like a thread worth watching closely. The second episode, which is airing right around now, carries its own small clue. The show described it with a line hinting at how exhausting it is to be Rick all the time, to carry the weight of being the smartest and most burdened person in every room. That description points toward an episode about the strain of being Rick, maybe a story where someone else has to walk in his shoes, or where the cost of his life gets put under a microscope. Within hours of this being said, that guess will either be proven right or knocked down, because the episode arrives almost immediately. That is the strange spot the season is in right now, with most of it still ahead and only the thinnest hints to go on. This is the honest heart of the matter. The titles are real, the order is real, the dates are real, but what actually happens inside episodes 2 through 10 is not known by anyone outside the people who made them. Any confident claim about the plots of those episodes, about who returns and who dies and what gets resolved, is a guess dressed up as knowledge. The smart way to read the map is to treat the names as hints and nothing more. Fun to study, useful for spotting patterns, but never mistaken for the finished story. Anyone claiming to already know the secrets of episodes that have not aired is selling something. What is fully solid, though, is the bigger picture around the season, and that picture is unusually clear. The people who make this show have been loud about the fact that it is nowhere near finished. Far from winding down, the series has already been promised many more seasons beyond this one, with future runs confirmed well past the current year. The co-creator himself has said the show is locked in for seasons that stretch years into the future. On top of that, a full movie is in the works, a separate film set in its own story apart from the main series, handled by a director who has worked on the show for a long time. The world of this show is not shrinking, it is growing, branching out into new shapes, with no ending in sight. The movie, being its own separate story, is its own interesting choice. By setting the film apart from the main series, the show frees itself to do big, wild things in the movie without messing up the careful history of the main show. The show on television can keep its threads exactly where they are, while the movie goes off and tells a story all its own. That kind of split is usually a sign of confidence, of a world big enough and popular enough to support more than one version of itself running at the same time. Few animated shows ever reach that point. This one has. The people behind it have backed this up with plenty of confidence. The showrunner has said the new season proves the show still has a full tank of gas left, that the ideas are flowing as freely as ever, and that Rick still has plenty of meanness left in him. The network has talked it up too, promising big, wild ideas paired with some of the best character work the show has ever done. There is one more quiet sign that the show is healthy and built to last. A few seasons back, the series had to replace its original lead voice actor, the man who first voiced both Rick and Morty, with new performers stepping into those huge roles. That kind of change can sink a show, since the voices are so much of what people love. Instead, the new actors slid into the parts so smoothly that most viewers barely noticed, and by now, they have fully settled in, carrying the characters as if they had always been there. A show that survives losing the voice of its two main characters and comes out the other side sounding just like itself is a show with deep roots. Some of that is just the usual noise that comes with launching a new season, but the steady drumbeat of confirmed future projects gives the talk some real weight. A show being set up for many more years tends to behave differently from one limping toward a finish. That fact changes how all those buried threads should be understood. A series with years of confirmed future ahead of it is under no pressure to cash in its biggest secrets right now. It can afford to let the forgotten wife sit in her box. It can leave the doubted friend under his cloud of suspicion. It can keep the old warrior resting somewhere far away with his hidden daughter. None of these threads has to pay off this season, because the show knows it has plenty of seasons left to pay them off. The runway is long, and a long runway means patience. For fans, this cuts both ways. The good news is that none of these threads are likely abandoned. A show with this much future is not going to forget the loaded guns it so carefully placed on the table. The setups around Diane, around the friend who might be fake, around Bird Person and his child are far too valuable to throw away, and there is plenty of room ahead to use them. The harder news is that this very same patience means the answers may not come quickly. A season of playful, standalone adventures, judging by those joking titles, might touch the deep threads only lightly, or save them entirely for a later year when the timing feels right. Then again, the show has a habit of hiding its heaviest punches inside seasons that look light. Some of its most gutting episodes have arrived in years that seemed mostly playful, dropped in without warning between the goofy adventures. A standalone, joke-titled season does not rule out one quiet episode that suddenly reaches into the buried past and breaks hearts. That is part of the show's whole trick, lulling everyone with silliness and then landing a real blow when their guard is down. So even a fun, loose run could hide a single, devastating chapter. The same way the recent finale slipped real dread into a credit scene nobody expected to fear. This also fits neatly with where Rick himself is as a character. The season opener showed a Rick who has grown softer, more open, more willing to let his family in. A show that has settled its main character into a calmer, healthier place, and that knows it has years of story left to tell, is a show that can take its time. It does not need to blow everything up at once. It can let Rick enjoy a stretch of relative peace, run some wild adventures, and slowly, season by season, circle back toward the heavy material when it chooses to. The confirmed long future and the calmer Rick point in the same direction, toward a show in no hurry. There is a kind of quiet promise in all of it. The buried wife, the suspected friend, the lost warrior, all of them are safe, in the sense that the show has both the will and the room to bring them back someday. The map of the season, those 10 joking names with one serious one at the end, suggests a year that mixes fun with the occasional deep cut, while the bigger picture promises that the deepest cuts of all are still coming, just maybe not all at once, and maybe not yet. For a long-running show, that is close to the best position it can be in. It has earned the trust to take its time, the audience willing to wait for it, and the runway to land every payoff on its own schedule. The threads are not lost. They are simply being saved for the day the show finally decides their moment has come. So the honest answer to the question of what the new season will dig up is a careful one. The titles hint at a playful run of big standalone ideas, capped by a finale whose straight, unjoking name points at something heavier, something about things lost coming home. The confirmed future tells us the show has all the time it needs and no reason to rush its biggest secrets. And the calmer Rick suggests the series is content, for now, now to let its hero breathe before dragging him back through his deepest pain. Put together, these clues sketch a season that is confident, in no hurry, and sitting on a mountain of stories it fully intends to tell in its own time. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. All of which leads back to the bigger picture, the reason any of this is worth watching so closely in the first place. A single season opener brought back the show's greatest villain, staged its wildest fight, and quietly reminded everyone of all the buried people still waiting in the dark. The map ahead promises more, but underneath the twists and the theories and the long list of threads, there is one larger idea that ties the whole thing together. A single thought about what this show has actually become after all these years, and why a story about a drunk scientist and his grandson still manages to hit as hard as it does. Section 10. What it was always about. Strip away the spaceships and the talking aliens and the endless other worlds, and this show has only ever been asking one quiet question. What do you do with pain you cannot fix? Every wild adventure, every monster, every clever gadget is really just a costume worn over that single human problem. A person loses something they cannot get back. The hurt does not go away on its own. So what do they do with it? That question sits at the bottom of everything the show has built. In the new season, with all its buried threads and its returning villain, is one more circle around the same deep idea. For most of the series, Rick has only one answer to that question. When something hurts too much, he deletes it. He erases it, buries it, numbs it, or runs from it. Faced with the loss of his wife, he did not heal. He drank, he turned cruel, he pushed everyone away, and he built a life designed to keep him too busy and too distant to feel the wound. When a copy of that lost wife turned up, recreated from memory, he did not sit with her. He locked her in a box and then erased his own knowledge that she was there. When his daughter's mind filled with pain, he reset it, smoothing the hurt away. When a deadly threat loomed over the family in the season opener, his first instinct was to hide it, to carry it alone in secret rather than let anyone share the weight. Over and over, Rick treats pain like a problem to be removed rather than a thing to be lived through. Even his everyday habits are forms of deletion. The constant drinking is a way to dull whatever he is feeling. The endless jumping from world to world is a way to never sit still long enough for a feeling to catch up to him. His cruelty pushes people back before they can get close enough to be lost. His genius lets him solve any problem except the one inside himself. Look closely, and almost everything about Rick is built to keep pain at a distance, to stay one step ahead of the grief that has been chasing him since before the show began. He is the smartest being in any room, and he has spent that vast intelligence mostly on the project of not feeling. The trouble, which the show keeps proving again and again, is that deleting pain does not actually work. The buried things never stay buried. The villain Rick thought he had ended came back wearing a new shape and holding a new weapon. The friend the world thought was gone forever was rebuilt and then revived, and his story still is not over. A memory that was suppressed inside Bird Person's mind, the existence of his own daughter, came roaring back and changed everything once it surfaced. Diane, erased from every world by an enemy and now erased again from Rick's own awareness by his own hand, remains the center that the whole show quietly orbits. Nothing in this series ever truly disappears. The thing you bury just waits in the dark, growing heavier, until it forces its way back into the light at the worst possible moment. The show is built to make this point even in its structure. It plants something, walks away, and then circles back seasons later, proving that it never actually forgot. A villain glimpsed early returns as the biggest threat. A friend killed off comes back twice. A wound from before the show even started keeps shaping the present. The series rewards the viewers who remember, because the show itself remembers everything. That long memory is not just clever writing. It is the whole point made into a shape. In a show where nothing the writers bury ever stays buried, the lesson that pain cannot be deleted is baked right into how the stories are told. Against that failing answer, the show keeps offering a better one, and it is almost embarrassingly simple. The thing that actually saves people in this world is connection, not cleverness, not power, not a perfect plan or a powerful machine. People. When Beth sank to her lowest point, lost in a false world and ready to give up, no gadget pulled her back. Her father climbed into her mind and simply showed up for her, the way he never had before, and that was enough. When Bird Person, worn down by a lifetime of betrayal, chose to stop living, the thing that changed his mind was not an argument. It was a daughter, a reason outside himself, a person to come back for. And when the family faced down the show's most dangerous villain in the season opener, the winning move was not Rick being the smartest man in the room. room. It was the whole family, together, choosing to fight as one. Morty matters most of all in this. For all his nervousness and all the times he gets dragged along, Morty is the steady heart the show measures Rick against. When Morty is near, Rick is forced to be at least a little better than his worst self because a grandson is watching. The bond between them, messy and unequal and often unfair as it is, keeps pulling Rick back toward caring, even as he insists he does not. Morty is the proof that Rick failed to stay alone. He let one person in years ago, and through that crack, the rest of the family slowly followed. This is where the season's central question finally finds its answer. All along, the opener kept asking whether Rick had truly changed, or whether his softer side was just a better disguise. And the answer the show keeps pointing toward is that real change was never about Rick becoming nicer, or gentler, or less sharp. The change that matters is the one between his two answers to pain. The old Rick deletes and hides and carries everything alone. The growing Rick, the one the recent seasons have been slowly building, chooses connection instead. The proof is right there in the opener. The man who began by hiding a secret in the garage ended by telling his family the truth and standing in the fight beside them. That single choice, to let people in rather than shut them out, is the whole arc in miniature. The smartest being across all the worlds is slowly learning the one lesson his genius could never give him. The strange business with Mr. Poopy Butthole fits the same idea from a different angle. The old Parasite episode laid down a rule that has quietly become the show's deepest belief. The fate creatures could only make happy memories, so the way to spot a real person was to find a bad memory, an annoyance, a fight, a flaw. Realness, in other words, lives in the rough parts. The people who are truly yours are the ones you have argued with, been hurt by, grown tired of, and loved anyway. Perfect, frictionless comfort is the lie. A bond with some pain stitched into it is the real thing. The whole recent run of the show keeps warning that smooth, easy comfort is exactly where danger hides, while the messy, difficult, genuine connections are the ones worth trusting. A family that drives each other crazy and still piles onto a common enemy together is the show's picture of something true. What makes all of this land so hard is how the show smuggles it in. On the surface, it is a loud, fast, ridiculous comedy about a drunk scientist and his nervous grandson having absurd adventures. The jokes come quickly, the worlds are silly, the violence is cartoonish. A viewer can watch for the laughs and the spectacle and never feel like they are being handed a lesson about grief or loneliness or the cost of shutting people out. And then, without warning, in the middle of all that noise, the show lands a quiet moment that cuts straight to the bone. A tired man asking for a vacation. A father finally showing up for his daughter. A friend choosing to live for a child he has never met. The silliness lowers the guard, and the truth slips right past it. This is a real skill, and the show does it on purpose. It spends most of an episode being loud and ridiculous, training the viewer to relax, to laugh, to expect nothing too heavy. Then, it picks one quiet moment and plays it completely straight, with no joke to soften it. Because the guard is down, that one honest beat hits with full force. A serious show telegraphs its sad moments from a mile away, so the viewer braces. This show ambushes them. The sadness arrives before anyone has time to put up a wall against it, which is exactly why it leaves a mark. That is also why the show has stuck with people the way it has.
A whole generation grew up watching it, laughing at the chaos, quoting the jokes, and absorbing its deeper ideas without quite realizing it was happening. Through years of these stories, the audience was quietly taught some hard and useful things. That you cannot outrun a loss by being busy or clever. That numbing a wound only lets it fester. That the people around you, flawed and annoying and imperfect as they are the only real medicine there is. None of it was preached. It was simply shown, again and again, wrapped in enough comedy that it never felt like a sermon. The lessons sank in sideways, which is often the only way real lessons ever sink in at all. There is something else in how people grew up with it. Many started watching young, drawn in by the wild animation and the fast jokes, too young to feel the weight underneath. Then they got older, and they kept watching. And somewhere along the way, the show seemed to change, even though it was really they who changed. A moment that once played as a funny throwaway started to ache. A line about loss that meant nothing at 13 meant everything at 25. The show grew up alongside its audience. Or maybe it was always this deep and they simply caught up to it. Either way, the same episodes that once made them laugh now make them go quiet, which is its own kind of proof of how much was hiding in there the whole time. There is a contradiction at the very heart of the show, and it is the engine that makes everything work. Out loud, the series constantly insists that nothing matters. Rick says it again and again. The universe is endless. Every choice is undone in some other world, and caring is for fools. The show wears that idea like armor, repeating it in nearly every episode, and yet everything the show actually does argues the exact opposite. It spends years
building characters whose pain matters, whose losses ache, whose bonds save them. It treats Diane's death as the wound that shaped a man. It treats a daughter as a reason to live. A show that truly believed nothing mattered could not break hearts the way this one does. The loud message is that nothing matters. The quiet message, buried under the jokes, is that everything does. And that gap between the two messages is where the entire show most secretly and painfully lives. Rick himself is the living shape of that contradiction. He is a man who desperately wants nothing to matter, because if nothing matters, then losing Diane does not have to hurt, and being a bad father does not have to count, and all the damage he has done can be shrugged off as meaningless. He clings to the idea that caring is foolish, because the alternative, that all of it matters and always did, is more than he can bear. The whole series is the slow, painful process of that armor cracking. Every time Rick saves someone he claims not to care about, every time he cannot let go, every time he chooses connection over deletion, the truth leaks through. He believes everything matters far too much, and he built his whole personality around pretending it does not. The new season picks up exactly there, with a Rick whose armor has cracked further than ever before. He is softer now, more present, more willing to admit that the people around him are worth protecting in the open rather than in secret. He still reaches for his old tricks, the cons and the secrets and the schemes, but he aims them at keeping his family safe rather than at keeping the world at arm's length. The smartest being alive, the one who can build a weapon to erase anyone from every world, is slowly learning the single thing he can never think or build his way out of. He needs people. He always did. And no amount of genius will ever delete that need. That is the thing hiding under all the jokes. The reason a cartoon about a drunk scientist and his grandson can hit harder than shows that try far more obviously to make people feel something. It found a way to talk about the hardest parts of being a person, the loss and the loneliness and the temptation to just go numb, while dressed up as the silliest possible thing. It earned its sad moments by hiding them inside its funny ones. And it built, over many years and many worlds, one steady argument under all the chaos, that pain cannot be deleted, only carried, and that the only thing that makes the carrying bearable is other people. So the buried threads, the forgotten wife and the doubted friend, and the warrior brought back from death are not just loose ends waiting to be tied. They are the show returning, yet again, to the only thing it has ever really been about. Each one is another version of the same question. What do you do with something you have lost and cannot fix? And each one points toward the same answer the show keeps quietly insisting on, season after season, beneath all the noise. Understanding that changes how the whole season looks. The twists stop being just twists and start being chapters in a much older story. The long, patient tale of a broken man slowly learning to stop running. But knowing what the show is about is not quite the same as knowing why it found its way into so many lives so deeply. Why this particular cartoon, out of all the loud and clever shows out there, became the one that people genuinely carry with them, the one they return to when they need something that understands them. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.